Hi, everybody. Just a guitar tip today on getting from chord to chord. So, if you're a player who's learning your open chords or you know some open chords, but you're finding that, there when you go from, say, a G to a D, there's this pause, between the chords that you're trying to get out of your playing to make it smoother, or let's talk about a tip that can help it become smoother. So, um, let's just tuck right into it. So, let's use some of the most common chords you're going to see. So let's use a G, right? We'll use a D, and we'll use an E minor, and a C. So maybe not in that order, but those are the chords we're going to use. So one of the things about moving from chord to chord is we want to avoid, say I go from D to G. We want to avoid this total disassembly of the chord and then rebuilding the chord. I don't bother putting my first finger on for G's. You can if you want. Nothing wrong with that. So we want to avoid that disassembly. So what we want to do is look for a note that's common. Now, if you play your G's with the two fingers on top and this, I have to call that the Pink Floyd G because it's like, from Wish You Were Here. You could leave that finger there. But let's just go with a stock G that you would see in a book or whatnot. So that would be this G. Sorry. And like I say, I'm not going to use my first finger. So, to get from D to G, the way I look at it is your biggest move is your biggest concern. And your biggest move is going to be this second finger, your middle finger, has got to get from the high E string all the way to the low E string on the 3rd fret. So it's a big diagonal move. You got to chuck it all the way to the bottom. But once that move's complete, you're almost done. So there's the D. I'm going to chuck that finger to the bottom and move my 3rd finger up to the high E string. And when I go back, I'll be doing the reverse. But again, this is the move I want to think of the most. That middle finger's got to go all the way to the high string. And see, it goes all the way to the high string. And then this one moves up. And this has pretty much got nowhere to go except drop where it's supposed to be. Right? So G to D. You're thinking about that move, these two fingers opening up, right? From there, your 3rd and 2nd finger can open up to make that G. And when you think about it in terms of that and not disassembling the whole chord, it tends to work a lot better. Let's do another example. If we take E minor and C, they come together quite a bit. Well, notice I can leave my middle finger, my 2nd finger on the D string from the E minor, and then just surround it with those other two fingers. This one's just waiting. I mean, that's where it wants to go. So your main move is just going to be take your 1st finger up to the 1st fret on the B string, and there's your C, right? E minor to C, and back. Of course, it's just the opposite. Let's do another one. How about E minor to D? So here's E minor again. Notice that D, there's nothing in common, right? They're different notes, but there are finger formations that are similar, and this is important. So in E minor to a D, these two fingers are relatively in the same shape as they move. Here they're on adjacent strings, the A string and the D string. And when I move them up to D, they're still together like this, like a little squadron, pairing. Now there's a gap of one string in the middle. This is on the G and this is on the high E, and I'm going to fill in the middle. But thinking of these two fingers, since they're basically the same shape, moving together avoids that whole disassembly of the chord, right? And turning it, stopping and having to rebuild it. What haven't we done? G to C, one of your most common chords ever. Well, here's a G, and here's a C, right? So, again, nothing really in common. What's my biggest move? Well, it's really this finger. The 3rd finger has got to come all the way up to the A string. So that's what I'm going to be thinking about. This moves to here. It kind of pushes the other fingers into a shape that they already need to be in. And you want to try to start just putting them down together rather than 1, 2, 3, right? Finger moves up, putting them down together. Say the next chord was E minor. I'm going to leave this middle finger on, right? And And then maybe the next one's D. I'm going to take those two as their little squadron or pairing, you know, move it up, drop the middle. And I need to start again. Think of this middle finger moving down to the low E string. Right? So thinking about a move, if you have to make one, sometimes you can leave a note common, or thinking about a move that is going to be your biggest move that's going to kind of set up the chord. You can just practice these chords slowly that way. If you're a more advanced player and you're into some more advanced chords, the same thing still applies. You know, if you got to get from one chord to another, thinking about common notes that, you know, are still there. And what is your move to avoid that disassembly and reassembly? Anyways, I hope that's helpful. And I would recommend just taking, you know, make up your own chord progressions or do it to a song that you know. Do it slowly and methodically and really think about how those chords get from one to another. You know what I mean? Like what is the motion that occurs that allows you to get to the next chord? And that's what you want to be practicing rather than this tearing everything apart and rebuilding it each time. Okay, hope that's helpful. See you next time.